Good morning. Happy Friday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, Nicole moves north. This morning, we are getting a look at the devastation in Florida caused by yet another major storm on the heels of Hurricane Ian. At least 2 people are now dead. Seaside homes seen toppling into the ocean, and tens of thousands without power as the sun rises. Our meteorologist Michelle Grossman will have the latest on Nicole's track. Battle box battle. As Election Day fades away, voting officials in the battleground states of Nevada and Arizona are still counting. Control of Congress hangs in the balance. We'll have the latest on those key races as a Georgia runoff looms. Plus, is former President Trump's influence over the GOP waning? We're going to take a closer look. Also this morning, it was a green letter day on Wall Street yesterday. A rare bit of good news on the inflation front boosted the markets big time over regular trading. So are investors anticipating those red-hot prices are going to cool off anytime soon? We'll dig into the numbers. Plus, Wakanda Forever. It is release day for the highly anticipated new Black Panther film. We've got a preview later in the hour, along with the rest of your can't-miss content for a weekend indoors away from that fall chill, unless you're Savannah, who has been praying for the fall chill to come and just running around outside, right?
Yeah, run around a little bit then. I like it because then it's like, oh, good, it makes sense to stay inside and watch all the good stuff we're going to tell you about.
Apple cider.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
And I do rely on our can't miss list. I'm like, it lines up my weekend.
It is a great guide for all of your content this weekend. All right, we're going to begin with the latest on Nicole.
That's right. This morning, Floridians are assessing the widespread damage left in the storm's wake. It's another setback for the state, already recovering from the devastating effects of Hurricane Ian. NBC News senior national correspondent Carrie Sanders is there with the latest.
Structural engineers and building inspectors will today examine the structures that were hit bad by Hurricane Nicole to determine whether they're still inhabitable. Like the homes over my shoulder, there's about 40 here that likely can never be repaired. This morning, after another deadly storm washed away miles of Florida coastline and left crumbling foundations of homes and businesses in its wake, residents and visitors are still feeling the impact.
Better watch out, we're going to blow away here.
Nicole crashing ashore early Wednesday as a Category 1 hurricane just south of Vero Beach, lashing the state with pounding rain, heavy winds, and dangerous storm surge.
The wind is wild.
In the aftermath, heavy flooding in St. Augustine, inundating streets. In St. Petersburg, 50-mile-per-hour winds shutting down the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. Severe erosion along Daytona Beach, as well as significant flooding downtown, prompting authorities to help any way they can. While hundreds of condo residents were forced to evacuate their building after the structure was deemed unsafe, the foundation of as many as 19 condo and hotel buildings here in Volusia County now showing signs of being compromised.
As you can see behind us here and other structures where it's just going in and eroding right underneath the foundations to the point where there's nothing left to hold it up.
Just south of Daytona, resident Krista Goodrich says homes and businesses once separated from the ocean by backyards, seawalls, sand dunes, and over 100 feet of beach are now vulnerable.
It was that same trifecta of Ian, King Tide, then Nicole, and it just made us so unstable that things just started collapsing.
The far-reaching storm also taking aim at beloved landmarks. In Lauderdale by the Sea, this popular fishing pier is in pieces.
The storm was 90 miles from here and it still destroyed the pier.
Now, after the first November hurricane to strike the U.S. mainland in 37 years, communities in the Sunshine State forced again to assess and rebuild. Access to the barrier islands remains restricted even to those who live here. They evacuated. They cannot immediately come back. That's so that the emergency crews, specifically the utility companies, can work to restring electricity where it's been knocked out.
All right, Carrie, thank you.
Let's get the latest on Nicole with your Morning News Now weather.
Yeah, Michelle Grossman's back with us with that and a look at your weekend. Hey, Michelle.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, we're going to continue to watch Nicole today and also tomorrow before it finally exits off the coast. But today it's going to be a wet and windy day from the southeast to the mid-Atlantic, the northeast, and also portions of the Ohio Valley into New England. We're looking at winds still at 35 miles per hour, so it is a tropical depression. That's a big weather story today. We're also watching wintry weather along the Great Lakes, some lake effect snow because the temperatures are so cold. I know it's a little small, but 14 degrees in portions of the northern plains. We're looking at temperatures at or below freezing in the northern plains, the central plains, into portions of the upper Midwest. And those chilly temperatures are headed east. We have 2 warm days left before we get that chill in place on Sunday. So this is what it looks like on radar. You can see Nicole's reach all the way from the southeast into the mid-Atlantic to the northeast already. And that will be the theme as we go throughout this Friday. So as you're out and about today, you need the umbrella, you need that jacket with the hood because it's going to be wet, it's going to be windy. And then a little bit to the west, you notice that line of showers. That is a cold front that's moving to the east, and that's going to combine with Nicole to sort of enhance that rainfall as we go throughout the day today into this evening. We're also looking at the chance for severe weather. We're looking at warm air coming off the Atlantic, and that's aiding in the chance for severe storms. A tornado watch is in effect until 3 o'clock. That's where you see that pink outline, including portions of Virginia into the Carolinas, but also looking at just heavy rain, where you see those yellows and oranges and reds, those brighter colors. That's where we're seeing the heavy rainfall. Those tropical downpours are happening. 12 million people at risk this afternoon, this evening for a few tornadoes. Also winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour at times, and that could cause damage by itself. Even along the coast and portions of New England and the Northeast, we could see winds gusting up to 50 miles per hour. So locally, 4 inches or higher when it comes to rainfall, and that's mainly throughout New England, the interior portions of Pennsylvania, New York, into the mid-Atlantic. So, guys, it's going to be a wet day in the Northeast. This will exit on Saturday, and then it's going to be a chilly day on Sunday. We'll talk more about that next hour.
All right, checked all my umbrellas this morning, so we're good to go. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Turning now to the midterm elections and control of Congress, which is still up for grabs. Votes in battleground states like Arizona and Nevada are still being counted, and the results in those places could impact the balance of power in Washington. NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Hake has the very latest. Garrett, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Good morning. Yeah, election week continues. The voting is done, but the fight for control of Congress continues. There are nearly 30 House races that haven't been called yet. Republicans still favored to flip that chamber. Democrats would have to win almost all the remaining seats to keep control, while in the Senate, they are staring down another runoff down in Georgia. All of this as former President Trump takes aim at a potential rival in the next election. This morning, the ripple effect from the midterm elections already affecting the next big race as control of Congress remains up in the air. Races in Arizona and Nevada still too early to call as vote counting continues. On social media, former President Trump attacking the process in those states without evidence as corrupt and allowing more time to cheat. But mostly Mr. Trump focused on attacking a potential 2024 rival, Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
Calling him a, quote, average Republican governor with great public relations. Mr. Trump posting that, quote, Ron came to me in desperate shape before his 2018 Florida election, and that he saved DeSantis from being, quote, politically dead. Mr. Trump has also been defending himself over the midterm results. But some Republicans are trying to turn away from the party's former leader, placing blame for a worse-than-expected election at Mr. Trump's feet for backing unelectable candidates and focusing on conspiracy theories.
If fealty to Donald Trump is the primary criteria for selecting candidates, we're probably not going to do really well.
Republican Mike Lawler defeated Democratic campaign chair Sean Patrick Maloney in New York.
You want to see the party move forward from Trump?
Yeah, I think moving in a different direction as we move forward is a good thing.
But even some Trump allies see DeSantis as the new Republican leader.
You know, I think Governor DeSantis is the biggest single winner of the night, and he will almost certainly become the rallying point for everybody in the Republican Party who wants to move beyond President Trump.
After defying expectations of a red wave on election night, Democrats still have a chance to keep the House, but they need to run the table to preserve their majority. And while GOP leader Kevin McCarthy has projected confidence he will have the votes to be the next speaker, some far-right Republicans appear ready to oppose him.
I have not seen the demonstrated fight that we're looking for.
And then there's Georgia. That December 6th runoff already drawing top surrogates from both parties, millions of dollars being spent there on a race that could end up controlling the Senate. And Savannah, here's a thought experiment. What happens if Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or both tries to go down there and campaign for Herschel Walker? I'm a campaign junkie here. Can't stop thinking about what's happening in the next race. We might see some of it start in this one.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there on all sides. Garrett, thank you so much, and good to see you. For more on the situation in Nevada, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk. She's outside at the Clark County Ballot Processing Center in Las Vegas. Stephanie, thank you for being up extremely early for us there. The Senate and governor's races are still too early to call. What is the latest tally so far?
Yeah. All right, so there was a change overnight, Savannah, and you had about 31,000 votes drop. And once again, we saw them break really hard for Cortez Masto. The lead for Laxalt going into the night was about 15,000. That has now dropped to 9,000. And the big remaining question is how many ballots are still out there that are uncounted. I'll tell you, it's more than 50,000 and probably less than 100,000. But, you know, if she continues to get those kinds of numbers in the remaining ballots, then she has a chance to edge out Laxalt in this race. But it's going to get really, 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 really close. And when it gets that close, there's just going to be an enormous amount of scrutiny on the vote counting. You've got provisionals to come. You've got what they call here in Nevada the cure. And the cure, which sounds like some sort of medieval torture ritual, is actually just fixing signatures and making sure mail-in ballots work. People whose ballot might be messed up have an opportunity to come in. So there's still lots to go here and days to come, Savannah.
So, Steph, you just said, I mean, there's a lot of scrutiny on this ballot counting process in Nevada. A lot of questions, a lot of people wondering, wanting to make sure it's going the way that they want it to be going. Clark County Voting Registrar Joe Gloria, held a press conference yesterday for an update on this process to try to give some transparency here. What did he have to say?
Yeah, I mean, he's getting a lot of questions on the pace of the counting of the mail-in ballots. And he says they're going as fast as they can. I pushed him a bit, and I was like, well, I mean, if you had more space and more people, wouldn't you be able to go a bit faster? And he said, yeah, but we don't. So listen to his response to some of these questions. Here's what he had to say.
We're moving at a pace that I think is a good pace for the amount of equipment and staff that we have on board. We're fully staffed. All of the equipment that we have available is being used. Saturday, we will have the majority of those ballots reported and tallied.
We can't, the message there, Savannah, we can't go faster. That's his message.
Yeah. I mean, even though people would very much like him to. I know he also addressed increased security presence at ballot processing centers. What was his message about that?
You know, yesterday you had former President Donald Trump call the process here in Clark County corrupt. And so you had Joe Gloria come out and push back on that. Here's what he had to say about security and those comments.
Unfortunate comments like the one that came out today from former President Trump gets certain people very fired up, and they're convinced that we are doing things that are inappropriate or against the law. And that's just not the case. So we have to make sure that these people that are coming in, and there are hundreds of them who are coming in on a daily basis, feel safe getting out of their car, coming into the building, leaving at night when it's dark, that they feel secure and continue coming to work so that we can do the work that needs to be done. So yes, we've upped security as a result of what we experienced in 2020.
And you see that security where we are out here this morning, even. There aren't many people out here right now, but there are more cameras, more officers. They are definitely watching this building very closely, Savannah.
All right, Stephanie Gosk, thank you so much. We will be keeping an eye on that. And now to some relief in the economy. Yesterday, U.S. markets posted their biggest one-day rally since 2020 after the October inflation numbers came in at a smaller than expected, though still high, 7.7%. NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chung is here on set with us again for more on these numbers. Brian, good to see you. Good morning.
Hey.
So walk us through yesterday's market action and why we saw these big moves. I mean, it was pretty sizable. Are we expected to keep seeing that today?
Well, I mean, first, I just have to acknowledge, I mean, I've been covering markets for a while. You almost never see massive gains like that in a single single day. The S&P 500 up 5%, the Dow Jones up 1,200 points. That's about 4%, and NASDAQ up 7%. You just don't see that. That's because of the positivity around the inflation report that we got yesterday, showing that prices increased 7.7 percentage points between October of this year and October of last year. Still very high. Keep in mind, where we want to be is somewhere closer to 2%. But broadly, it seems like at least directionally, it was 9.1% earlier in the year. At least that number is going down, not in the other direction.
So does that mean we saw the peak of inflation?
Well, it seems like that trend line would suggest so, but I would say let's not put the mission accomplished banner up quite yet. And that is because, look, rent, food, those types of categories are still seeing price increases, and those are the largest expenditures for a lot of Americans, as well as just kind of the, putting a roof over your head. Shelter is what the government data kind of classifies rent, but also equivalent payments for your mortgages. But we did see some things decline in prices: clothing, shoes, toys, furniture, jewelry. These could all be things that you might be buying for the holiday season. Washer dryers also, apparently. So it could be a good time to buy a washer dryer for some reason.
There you go, appliance shopping if you need to. All right, so let's widen out now and talk about the Fed. So the Fed has been increasing these interest rates to try to cool inflation. Until this report, we hadn't seen proof that it was working. Does this mean now they could take their foot off the pedal on that?
Well, again, we're still far away from where the Federal Reserve wants inflation to be. So the talking point is that they're going to continue to raise interest rates. The idea being, to take some steam out of this economy by making borrowing more expensive. But the talking point is also that the Federal Reserve could make those interest rate bumps a little bit smaller. So they've been going by 0.75 percentage points each of the last 4 meetings. Markets now pricing in a high chance that they'll go down to 50 basis points, 0.5% in the next meeting, which, by the way, is going to be the second week of December. We'll have to see then.
Yeah, I think some of that positive market reaction there, too, to that hope, right?
Yeah.
That we're going to see that.
And futures are higher right now, too, so it could be another green day on this Friday.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. Great to have you with us on a Friday. All right, turning now to a major blow to President Biden's plan to provide student debt relief to millions of Americans. A federal judge in Texas has blocked the president's loan cancellation program, calling it, quote, an unconstitutional exercise of Congress's legislative power. The Justice Department has already moved to appeal the ruling, which would provide eligible Americans up to $20,000 in relief from their student loans. Coming up, a frightening surge in dangerous RSV cases has parents across the country worried about winter. But there is hope on the horizon. After the break, we'll tell you about the new vaccine that's now in the works. You're watching Morning News Now. Stay with us. We're back with growing concern in households and hospitals across America about the surge in severe RSV cases. And now the CDC is confirming that flu cases are also spiking earlier than in past years, making fears of a so-called tripledemic a reality. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa joins us now with the latest on this. Hi, Maggie. Good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. Yeah, that dreaded and so-called tripledemic, a crippling combination of the flu, COVID, and RSV. Experts, have been forecasting that for weeks, if not months. And now new data shows that forecast may already indeed be rolling in. This as parents across the country scramble to get ahead of America's latest viral surge.
Ready. This morning, tripledemic fears and fall viral surges hitting home in Missouri. 2-year-old Rosie's nasal swab capping a miserable week.
I've been sick the past few days. It's been pretty bad. It's a bad fever, like flu-like symptoms.
Rosie's parents among the many who raced to this St. Louis drive-through clinic Thursday to test kids for the flu, COVID, and RSV. 3 viral pillars of the so-called tripledemic sparking fear among families coast to coast.
The doctors went from go home and let us know if it gets worse to quite literally checking him for a pulse.
Now, new evidence pediatric hospitals overwhelmed with severe RSV indeed face a second foe, the flu, with nearly 6,500 flu patients admitted to America's hospitals this week and 3 pediatric flu deaths.
If you add an Omicron surge to the current RSV surge, there's no place for them.
In Massachusetts, some hospitals forced to postpone pediatric surgeries, while in Arizona, 100% of children's hospital beds are full. Nationwide, that number at 77%.
I don't want her to have to end up in the hospital.
While worry mounts, this morning, hope on the horizon. An RSV vaccine in the works. Drug maker Pfizer vowing to apply for FDA approval by the new year.
The vaccine, when given to pregnant women, protected their babies from getting severe respiratory syncytial virus
virus up to 80% in the first 3 months of life.
The earliest that vaccine could be available next season. Meanwhile, mom of two, Elizabeth Lyons, is nervous now. Her 11-year-old already had the flu this season. Now, the toddler is sick.
All these viruses going around. How freaky is it as a mom?
Oh, yeah, it's scary. It's a lot of kids getting sick. I work at a school, so yeah, it's a lot of kids getting sick.
And we should point out each of the parents in our piece now waiting up to 72 hours for the results of those PCR tests to find out if their kids have the flu, COVID, RSV, or if they're negative for all three, quite possibly something else. In the meantime, doctors say another issue they want to highlight that they say is exacerbating this is the nursing shortage. They point out even in states with better/lower bed occupancy rates, a lot of hospitals might not have the nursing staff they need or ideally would have to care for all the kids being admitted. Of course, we should note those on staff are doing their very best.
Oh, absolutely. Our healthcare heroes. Maggie, thank you so much. Now let's get you some international headlines. Rising tensions between Italy and France as the migrant conflict continues is where we're going to start with NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavanga in Rome for us. Hey, Claudio, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, a boat carrying 230 migrants that has been barred from docking in Italy for the past few days finally made it to the French port of Toulon this morning. As a consequence, France has decided to suspend a plan to take in another 3,500 migrants who are currently in Italy. Tensions between the two countries have escalated since the newly elected right-wing government in Italy stopped some search and rescue boats run by NGOs that save migrants in the Mediterranean from disembarking on its shores. France has called Italy's behavior unacceptable, but Italy insists it has been taking its fair share of migrants. Let's go to Brazil, where a report by the Defense Ministry say they found no sign of vote rigging, despite claims by the outgoing President Jair Bolsonaro of potential fraud. Bolsonaro lost the presidential election to Lula da Silva, but took days to concede. But while the report showed no fraud or inconsistency in the electoral process, it refused to rule out the possibility entirely, raising worries that this may fuel Bolsonaro's supporters' anger. Finally, let's move to Egypt, where an archaeologist who has been searching for Cleopatra's tomb for 20 years says she may be close to finding it. Kathleen Martinez say that she and her team uncovered a 4,000-foot-long tunnel more than 40 feet underground near the Egyptian coast that may lead to Cleopatra's tomb. The excavation revealed sanctuaries, a sacred lake, more than 1,500 objects, busts, statues, golden pieces, and a huge collection of coins portraying, well, guess who, apart from Alexander the Great, Cleopatra herself, guys.
All right, very cool. Thank you so much, Claudio.
Now, the pandemic brought about a lot of losses, and a new art exhibition at the National Mall is helping viewers remember the healthcare workers who gave their lives. Here's NBC News Now anchor Aaron Gilchrist.
These are the faces of heroes, healthcare workers from around the world who fought the COVID pandemic. They worked tirelessly to keep their communities healthy, but the virus ultimately took all of their lives.
When my mom got sick, it was hard to just kind of grasp it.
Fiona Garza Tulip lost her mother Isabel to COVID 2 years ago.
I thought, my mom is invincible. She's been through so many crazy illnesses working in the hospital. Like, she's going to get through this.
Fiona's mom was a respiratory therapist at a hospital in Dallas when the pandemic started.
The challenge was she didn't have enough PPE. They were reusing their PPE. They had to turn it in at the end of the day. Someone else was taking it and putting it away.
Fiona believes her mom got COVID from a patient in June of 2020. A week later, on July 4th, she passed away.
It was really hard to accept. It was really hard to believe. It took me a very, very long time to believe that she was gone.
Gone but not forgotten. That is what the Hero Art Project is trying to make a reality for the first time on display on the National Mall in Washington.
It was just like numbers, and you weren't seeing faces.
Susanna Perlman created the project, a collection of more than 100 portraits so far, a tribute not in numbers, but with faces, names, and stories of just some of the thousands of healthcare workers who died during the pandemic.
We should always honor that. You know, first responders, nurses, doctors, and medical staff who just kept on showing up.
New York artist Lynn St. Clair Foster was one of dozens of artists enlisted for the Hero Art Project. She's worked with a handful of families to capture the essence of their loved ones, including Fianna's mother, Isabel.
There was just such a light in her eyes. She was happy. She was glorious. I mean, you could tell that she really lived a full life in her short life. So that's what I was trying to really capture. There was nothing sad about her.
We were there when Fianna and Lynn met for the first time, and Fianna got to hold this special portrait.
I love it. Oh, wow.
It is exactly the reaction this portrait, all of the portraits, are hoping for. To tell a story, to create a connection, to remember.
So what were you hoping for? What did you want the portrait to capture?
I wanted to capture her spirit. She was full of joy and kindness and love, and I wanted that to be drawn out in this portrait, and I think it was.
Our thanks to Erin Gilchrist for such an important story. And that exhibit is going to be up through November 28th. So check it out if you can. Coming up, it is an age-old question that I'm sure we've all asked ourselves at some point in our lives. Can money really buy happiness?
Well, we've got the results of a new study that just might answer it at least a little bit. Once and for all. Stick around. That's up next. Financial headlines now. We're going to start in the UK, where the dreaded R word is back in the headlines.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Savannah. That's right. So the UK is on the brink of recession. Data out today shows the economy contracted by 0.2% in the third quarter. That was better than expected despite the downturn. The decline, however, does not represent a technical recession, which is defined as 2 straight quarters of negative growth after second quarter GDP was revised higher. But the UK is facing a historic cost of living crisis, and the Bank of England is forecasting a recession could last well into 2024. United Airlines is giving pilots a 5% raise months ahead of schedule as the airline and the pilots union struggle to agree on a new contract. During the pandemic, United promised to boost pay once it started earning consistent profits. Now travel demand has rebounded and United is profitable again. The pay raise will now be implemented in December. Last week, the union rejected a tentative deal that would have included raises of more than 14%. And it may be cheaper to eat out instead of at home on Thanksgiving. A report from Wells Fargo finds the cost of food away from home has increased about half the rate of food at the supermarket. That means some of you could spend about the same on a dish at a restaurant as you would preparing it at home without expending all the time and energy. Turkey prices are forecast to be up 23% versus last year due to inflation and the impact of a bird flu outbreak. Eggs, butter, and flour prices are also significantly higher this year, guys.
All right, just got to find a restaurant that's open. All right.
Although I'm cooking at home, so I'll let you guys know how much it costs.
I'm like, oh, great. Why did I agree to this? Savannah, thank you.
You got it.
So a new study out this week tried to answer an age-old question. Can money really buy happiness?
That's right. Researchers looked at the effects of giving 200 people a one-time sum of $10,000. And maybe not surprisingly, it found that people who received the cash transfers generally reported feeling happier than people who did not receive the payment.
All right, but then things get a little more complicated. So people with household incomes above $123,000 did not report noticeable improvements in their happiness.
All right, for more, we're joined by one of the study's co-authors, Dr. Ryan Dwyer. He's a senior researcher at the Happier Lives Institute, which sounds like a great place to work. Dr. Dwyer, thank you for being here with us. Maybe you'll make our morning a little happier. First, though, just tell us about this experiment and how exactly it worked.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So in this study, we were really interested in how much happiness can be gained by wealth redistribution. So in this study, we worked with the TED organization and 2 wealthy donors who wanted to give away some money and do it in a way that not only helped people, but also made some progress in our understanding of human nature. So we gave away $10,000 to these 200 participants, and they reported their happiness over the course of 3 months. And then we just tracked and saw what happened with how they spent the money and how happy they were compared to a control group. So yeah, like you said,
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So we found that people were happier overall, but in particular, people with lower incomes were much happier than people with higher incomes. So those making about $10,000 were about twice as happy as those who made $100,000.
Yeah, and I want to ask you more specifically, why was it that $123,000 seemed to be the cutoff line? Because you might think, well, anyone getting free money would be happier.
Yeah, I don't think that it's really a hard cutoff. It's just that the impacts of additional wealth for people who already have a lot of money, it just doesn't make that big of a difference. If you think about eating a piece of chocolate cake, the first bite's really good, but by the time you make it to the end of your slice of chocolate cake, each bite just isn't giving you just as much happiness as the first bite did.
What else? What did you learn that surprised you the most, I guess? This is sort of like in some ways surprising, in some ways not. What did surprise you?
Yeah, so we were able to also estimate how much happiness the millionaires lost by giving away this money. And we actually found that it wasn't really that much. And by giving the money away to the 200 people who were able to benefit from this money, they actually generated 225 times as much happiness by giving it in the hands of 200 people rather than keeping it concentrated in the hands of the 2 donors.
So for people who are reading this study or watching right now and learning about it, what do you hope is the takeaway for them?
I think the main takeaway of this study is that no matter where you are on the income spectrum, if you're able to share some of your wealth to other individuals who have less than you, then you can have a greater impact than probably keeping that money for yourself. Again, thinking about chocolate cake, if you've already had a few bites, you can give some of your chocolate cake to someone who hasn't had a bite yet, and they're probably going to enjoy that bite more than you might.
Dr. Dwyer has clearly never seen me eat chocolate cake.
He's still loving it by the end, I think is what that means.
Just kidding. All right.
Dr. Dwyer, thank you. Dr. Dwyer of the Happier Lives Institute.
No kidding. We want to come work with you.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time this morning.
All right. Coming up, a beloved New York City Christmas tradition that hopefully makes us happier, seemingly appears out of thin air each year. Well, I've got the behind the branches look at what it took to find this year's massive 30-rock tree, starting off our holiday season right.
Welcome back. The human race will reach a milestone on Tuesday. That's because on that date, the United Nations projects that the world's population will pass 8 billion people for the first time. They're calling it the Day of 8 billion. And in case you're wondering, we reached 7 billion back in 2011. The UN predicts that we likely won't see the population reach 9 billion until 2037. The United Nations Secretary General says the milestone is an occasion to celebrate diversity and advancements while considering humanity's shared responsibility for the planet. All right, there you go. 8 billion of us. 8 billion of us.
I want to know whose job it is to count.
Yeah, right? How do they know exactly when? And on Tuesday, so specific.
I know. All right, very cool. We'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
All right, the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree is pulling into Midtown Manhattan tomorrow morning from about 200 miles away. Now, I'm rocking my way around the tree again this year with a behind-the-scenes look at the challenge of finding this year's perfect centerpiece for the heart of Manhattan.
It's a Christmas tree that was decked in mystery. The moment Rockefeller Center's head gardener spotted this Norway spruce, he knew it was the one. Just one problem: this beauty was on a property with no houses, no clear owner. So before anyone could start cutting, they had to do some digging to figure out who the tree belonged to.
You know, when I first got contacted, the first reaction is what tree?
Turns out Neil Leibowitz owns the tree, which sits quietly along a busy road in Queensbury, New York. The land is an investment property, so Neil never really paid much attention to this 82-footer until Rock Center's head gardener, Eric Pazé, came around.
It took Eric to look at it and say, this is a really beautiful tree. It didn't quite mean the same thing until all of a sudden somebody wants it and you start looking at it differently.
Soon, everyone will be looking at it. Now, to picture the tree's future, it's best to look to the past.
3, 2, 1!
By month's end, this new tree, like last year's, will be wrapped in more than 50,000 multicolored LED lights, then topped with a 900-pound Swarovski star that's covered in 3 million crystals. It's an evergreen ritual that dates back to 1931. The construction workers who were building Rock Center put up their own Christmas tree, a tradition that, like a tree, has grown, giving us a yearly beacon that shines just as bright as the skyscrapers towering high above.
If it can bring a smile and awe to a little child or help cheer up somebody who's a little blue, it's all worth it.
After learning his tree had been picked, Neil did have to keep it a secret for a tiny bit.
No, it's actually been kind of fun. You know, listen, I'm a lawyer by profession. You know, confidentiality goes with the business.
Now the secret is out, the mystery is solved, and the lonely tree that once sat on a houseless plot of land, well, it's about to make millions of new friends.
And experts say this year's tree is about 85 to 90 years old, weighs around 14 tons, so it's big. Crews cut it down yesterday and will be pulling into our backyard here tomorrow morning. And of course, the special tree lighting ceremony takes place November 30th.
You don't seem that excited.
No, I am very excited. I got to ride in on it last year.
I am very excited.
No, I got to ride in on it last year, which was really exciting. I mean, I was like hanging off the trees. So
that's fun.
That was super
I can't wait.
fun.
So when we're back here Monday, it'll be right outside
It'll
this
be up.
wall.
You won't be able to see the lights or anything yet.
Yeah.
It'll be covered by those things.
Yeah,
but you'll
she
be
gets
able to
her
see
makeover.
It. You'll be able to smell it, too. All right. All right, that does it for this hour. Thankfully, the Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Stay with us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.